We all know Yosemite National Park as one of America's most beautiful and well-studied natural treasures. Over 750,000 acres of granite cliffs, giant sequoias, and pristine wilderness documented by countless photographers, climbers, and naturalists over 150 years of exploration. But what if I told you that beneath the Instagram-perfect landscapes and crowded viewpoints lie mysteries that rangers discuss only in whispers? Disappearances that follow patterns the Park Service refuses to acknowledge, and discoveries hidden behind warning signs that don't explain what they're actually warning against? Doesn't make sense, does it? Yosemite is supposed to be safe, mapped, understood. Yet every year people vanish on those well-marked trails, sounds echo from impossible locations, and hikers stumble upon things that shouldn't exist in a park visited by 4 million people annually. Today we're uncovering 6 mysteries hidden inside Yosemite National Park. Warnings you need to know before your next visit, because the most dangerous places aren't always marked on maps. In July 2013, a family of 4 from Sacramento entered Yosemite for a weekend camping trip, checking in at the Porcupine Flat Campground on Tioga Road. The father, Michael Fernandez, was an experienced outdoorsman who'd hiked Yosemite dozens of times. His wife Angela and their 2 children, ages 8 and 11, were less experienced but properly equipped and prepared. On their second day, Saturday morning, Michael decided to hike to May Lake with his 11-year-old son David, while Angela and their daughter stayed at Campbell. May Lake is a popular destination, a well-maintained trail that sees hundreds of hikers daily during summer. The hike should have taken 4 hours round trip. Michael and David never returned. When Angela reported them missing Saturday evening, rangers initiated a search that would become one of the most extensive in Yosemite history. Over 200 personnel, search dogs, helicopters with thermal imaging, and mountain rescue teams scouring every inch of the May Lake area. Searchers found Michael's car exactly where he'd parked it. They found the sign-in sheet at the trailhead with Michael's name, noting he and David started the hike at 9:47 a.m. But beyond that point, nothing. No footprints on the trail despite soft dirt that should have recorded them. No evidence at May Lake itself, a small alpine lake where hikers typically rest and eat lunch. No gear dropped or abandoned. Most disturbingly, search dogs lost the scent completely just 400 yards up the trail, as if Michael and David had simply ceased to exist at that point. The search continued for 3 weeks, expanding to cover over 40 square miles of wilderness, including areas far from the May Lake Trail that Michael, an experienced hiker, would have had no reason to enter. Rangers checked every cabin, ranger station, and remote campsite in the region. They interviewed hundreds of other hikers who were on the trail that day. No one reported seeing a man and boy matching their description. On August 5th, the official search was suspended with no explanation given beyond no evidence of the missing parties has been located. Michael and David Fernandez remain missing, and their case file, when requested through Freedom of Information Act, is heavily redacted with entire pages blacked out under exemptions usually reserved for national security matters. Why would a hiking disappearance case require that level of secrecy? One ranger who worked the search, speaking anonymously years later, described something that wasn't included in official reports. On the 3rd day of searching, his team found something odd about 200 yards off the main trail, a circular clearing roughly 30 feet in diameter, where vegetation had been flattened. Not broken or torn, but pressed down uniformly, as if by enormous weight or pressure. The ground at the center showed slight discoloration, darker than surrounding soil, and when they tested it, their meters detected unusual magnetic readings, fluctuations that didn't correspond to any natural geological formation. The ranger was ordered to photograph the site, mark its GPS coordinates, and then told explicitly not to mention it in his official report. When he asked why, his supervisor told him, "Some things we find don't help locate missing persons. They just raise questions we can't answer. So we focus on the search, not the anomalies." The clearing was gone 3 days later, vegetation returning to normal as if it had never existed. Michael and David's case is disturbing but not unique. Since 1958, over 150 people have disappeared in Yosemite under circumstances that defy conventional explanation. Not lost hikers eventually found or victims of obvious accidents, but complete vanishings where the person simply ceases to exist. The patterns are consistent enough that researchers who study missing persons in national parks have identified what they call the Yosemite profile. Experienced hikers who disappear on popular trails in good weather, vanishing in time windows measured in minutes, leaving no trace despite extensive searching in limited areas where they couldn't realistically have traveled far. One researcher, David Paulides, who's documented hundreds of national park disappearances in his Missing 411 series, notes that Yosemite has one of the highest rates of these profile-matching disappearances of any park in the system. His work is controversial, dismissed by Park Service officials as cherry-picking data and ignoring obvious explanations, but the raw numbers are undeniable. People disappear in Yosemite at rates that statistical analysis suggests are higher than chance alone would predict, and they disappear in ways that don't fit typical lost hiker scenarios. But the disappearances aren't the park's only mystery. Move deeper into Yosemite's backcountry, away from the valley floor and popular trails, and you enter areas that rangers patrol but don't publicize, restricted zones that appear on no official park map, but that experienced backcountry hikers occasionally stumble upon. One such zone exists in the remote northwestern section of the park, near Matterhorn Peak, an area so rugged that it sees perhaps a few dozen visitors per year. In 2008, a solo backpacker named Thomas Kerr was hiking cross-country in this region, navigating by GPS rather than established trails, when he encountered something that stopped him cold. A fence, not a decrepit historical fence or a natural boundary, but a modern chain-link fence, 8 feet tall, topped with barbed wire, stretching across a narrow valley. Kerr followed the fence for nearly a quarter mile before finding a gate, locked with a heavy-duty padlock and marked with a simple sign. Closed area, National Park Service Research Zone, no public access, violators subject to prosecution. The sign gave no explanation of what was being researched or why such extreme security was needed in a remote wilderness area. Kerr, an experienced hiker who'd explored Yosemite for 20 years, had never heard of any NPS research requiring fenced perimeters. Curious, he hiked along the fence's perimeter, discovering it enclosed roughly 40 acres of valley floor and mountainside. Through the chain link, he could see what appeared to be equipment cases, possibly instrumentation, partially concealed under camouflaged tarps. He took photographs and GPS coordinates before continuing his hike. When Kerr tried to research the fenced area after returning home, he found nothing. The GPS coordinates he'd recorded showed only blank wilderness on official park maps. Inquiries to the Park Service were met with generic responses about ongoing scientific studies and reminders that all research activities in national parks are conducted in accordance with federal regulations. But what kind of research requires an 8-foot fence in a location most people will never visit? One possible explanation came from an unexpected source. In 2015, declassified documents from the 1960s revealed that Yosemite was one of several national parks where the U.S. Geological Survey conducted classified seismic monitoring, ostensibly to study earthquake activity, but actually to detect underground nuclear tests by foreign powers during the Cold War. The monitoring stations were deliberately placed in remote areas and fenced to prevent tampering. Most were decommissioned by the early 1990s, but some documents suggest that monitoring equipment remains in place for ongoing geological research, now under different agencies with different purposes. Could the fence Kerr found be a remnant of this program? Possibly, but that doesn't explain why it appeared well-maintained with a modern lock, suggesting active use, or why the Park Service is so reluctant to acknowledge its existence. Several other hikers have reported encountering similar fenced areas in remote parts of Yosemite, always in locations that require serious backcountry navigation to reach, always marked with vague research zone signs, and always absent from official documentation. One hiker who reported seeing what he described as large ventilation shafts, like mine shafts, inside one of these fenced areas had his report removed from a hiking forum at the request of the National Park Service, citing security concerns. Security concerns about what? No official explanation was provided. The fenced area suggests something is being monitored, studied, or perhaps concealed in Yosemite's backcountry. Something important enough to warrant physical security in areas so remote that fences seem unnecessary for preventing accidental public access. Whatever these research zones contain, the Park Service clearly prefers that most visitors remain unaware they exist. Even more unsettling than restricted zones are the sounds. Yosemite rangers, when pressed off the record, will acknowledge what they call the valley voices. Acoustic phenomena reported by hikers and climbers throughout the park, but particularly concentrated in Yosemite Valley itself. The sounds are described consistently, a low-frequency hum, almost below the threshold of hearing, that causes physical discomfort, nausea, headaches, and disorientation in some listeners. The hum seems to originate from within the granite walls themselves, echoing through the valley in ways that don't correspond to any known geological process. The phenomenon was first officially documented in 1973, when a group of rock climbers on El Capitan reported hearing strange sounds while bivouacked on a ledge 2,000 feet up the sheer granite face. They described it as mechanical, like distant machinery, but rhythmic and pulsing rather than steady. The sound was loud enough to wake them from sleep and persistent enough that they recorded several minutes of audio using a portable recorder one climber carried. When they returned to the valley and played the recording for rangers, expecting to be told they'd heard wind or falling rock, the rangers' reaction was unexpected. They confiscated the tape, claiming it was needed for acoustic study, and returned it 3 weeks later, blank, allegedly due to equipment malfunction during analysis. The climbers, all experienced mountaineers with no history of exaggeration or attention-seeking, described the rangers' behavior as nervous, almost fearful, when listening to the recording. One ranger allegedly said, "Before the tape was confiscated, you heard it clearly. That's not good. Stay off the walls for a few weeks." When pressed for explanation, the ranger refused to elaborate. Since then, dozens of climbers have reported similar experiences, sounds emanating from within the granite, always described with the same characteristics: low frequency, pulsing, mechanical sounding, and seeming to originate from inside solid rock. Modern climbers often carry digital recorders, and several have captured the phenomenon, but when these recordings are analyzed by acoustic engineers, the results are puzzling. The sounds don't match known geological processes, rockfalls, wind, water flow, or tectonic activity, but they also don't match any human-made machinery. The frequency patterns are too regular to be natural, but too complex to be simple mechanical operation. Some researchers have proposed explanations involving resonance effects, the granite cliffs acting as massive acoustic chambers that amplify and distort normal environmental sounds into the strange hums climbers report. But this doesn't explain why the sounds are heard most frequently at night, when valley noise from traffic and tourists is minimal, or why they're reported from locations miles apart, as if whatever generates the sound exists throughout the valley's granite substrate. In 2011, a team from Stanford Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics received permission to study the phenomenon, placing microphones at various locations in the valley and on several climbing routes. Over 3 weeks, they recorded hundreds of hours of audio, and their analysis, published in an obscure academic journal, noted anomalous, low-frequency acoustic events of undetermined origin occurring with statistical regularity during nocturnal hours. Translation: they heard something, recorded it, analyzed it, and have no idea what it is. The lead researcher later admitted in an interview that the strangest aspect wasn't the sounds themselves, but their timing. The acoustic events occurred at precise intervals, every 43 minutes during the night, starting at approximately 11 p.m. and continuing until dawn. This regularity suggests something artificial, or at least intentional. But the researchers found no equipment, no machinery, nothing that could be generating the sounds. When asked if he thought the sounds were natural or artificial, the researcher paused before answering, "I think they're real. I think they're generated by something physical, not psychological. But I can't tell you if they're natural geological processes we don't understand or something else." What troubles me is the third possibility, that they're artificial but not human. That's the explanation that fits the data best, but it's also the one I don't want to believe. The valley voices continue, reported by a few climbers each season, but most who hear them don't report it, assuming they'll be dismissed as cranks or attention seekers. Rangers, when tourists mention strange sounds, typically attribute them to rockfall echo, wind, or distant traffic noise. Explanations that don't quite fit, but are easier to accept than admitting the park itself might be generating sounds we cannot explain. Related to the acoustic mystery is something visual that's been reported with increasing frequency since the late 1990s. Lights on Half Dome. Half Dome, Yosemite's iconic granite monolith, is one of the most photographed natural features in America, climbed by thousands annually via the cable route installed in 1919. During the day, it's a busy place, almost a highway of hikers ascending and descending the steep granite face. But at night, when the cables are removed and access is prohibited, something strange happens. Lights appear on Half Dome's summit and upper slopes, visible from valley viewpoints miles away. The lights are described consistently: bright, white, or bluish, moving slowly across the granite face, sometimes appearing singly, sometimes in groups of 3 or 4. They're not headlamps from unauthorized night climbers. The lights are too large, too bright, and move in ways that don't match human climbing patterns. Occasionally they appear to hover, stationary for minutes before continuing their slow traversal of the dome's surface. Photography enthusiasts trying to capture the lights have found they're difficult to photograph, often appearing on film or digital sensors as diffuse glows rather than distinct points of light, and their brightness varies unpredictably, sometimes brilliant enough to cast shadows in the valley, other times barely visible. In 2004, a professional photographer named Lisa Chen spent 5 nights filming Half Dome from Glacier Point, hoping to capture the lights. On her 3rd night, she succeeded, recording 18 minutes of footage showing multiple lights moving across the dome's surface. Her video, posted online, shows 3 distinct light sources moving in what appears to be a coordinated pattern, ascending from the base of the subdome, crossing the main face, and disappearing over the summit. The lights move steadily, taking approximately 40 minutes to complete their traverse, far slower than any human could climb that route. Chen submitted her footage to the National Park Service, expecting them to investigate, but received only a brief letter thanking her for her interest and suggesting the lights were likely reflections from the valley or atmospheric phenomena. No investigation was conducted, or if one was, no findings were released publicly. Chen's footage remains the best documentation of the Half Dome lights, but it's not unique. Dozens of visitors have captured similar phenomena, though usually only brief glimpses or low-quality images. What makes the lights particularly mysterious is their apparent regularity. They're reported most frequently during the new moon, when ambient light is minimal, and they follow similar paths across the dome's face, almost as if whatever generates them is following a route or conducting some kind of survey. Some researchers have proposed natural explanations: ball lightning. Though this is rare in Yosemite's dry climate, phosphorescence from mineral deposits, though granite doesn't typically phosphoresce, or even bioluminescent insects. Though no species known to produce light bright enough to be visible from miles away exists in Yosemite, others suggest the lights might be related to the acoustic phenomena, both manifestations of some unknown geological process occurring within the granite. The more fringe theories propose everything from secret military experiments to paranormal activity, but these lack evidence and are dismissed by serious researchers. What's undeniable is that the lights exist. Dozens of independent witnesses have seen and documented them, and no official explanation has been provided that satisfactorily accounts for their characteristics and behavior. Half-Dome's lights remain one of Yosemite's most visible yet least acknowledged mysteries, visible from public viewpoints yet ignored by official park literature. As if acknowledging them would require explanations the Park Service isn't prepared to give. Perhaps most disturbing of all Yosemite's mysteries is what rangers find but don't report. The discoveries made during routine patrols or searches that are documented in incident reports but never reach public awareness. One ranger, who worked in Yosemite for 15 years before transferring to another park, described several such discoveries in an anonymous interview published on an outdoor forum before being removed at the Park Service's request. According to this ranger, during a backcountry patrol in 2009, he discovered a campsite deep in the wilderness, miles from any established trail, that showed signs of recent occupation but was abandoned in haste. The camp included a high-quality tent, still staked and undamaged, camping gear, stove, sleeping bags, food supplies, and most oddly, a journal filled with detailed notes about sounds in the granite and pattern recognition in the acoustic events. The journal's final entry, dated 2 days before the ranger found the camp, read only, "They're not random. The intervals are mathematical. Something is counting down. We need to leave before it reaches 0. The camp's occupants were never identified. Their tent and gear were removed by rangers and the incident was classified as abandoned property recovered, a routine designation that requires no follow-up investigation." When the ranger asked his supervisor about the journal and whether they should try to identify and contact the camp's owners to ensure their safety, he was told the matter was handled and he should not discuss it further. The ranger later learned that the journal was sent to NPS headquarters in Washington, D.C., an unusual destination for lost property, and was never returned to Yosemite. Other rangers have described similar discoveries: abandoned campsites with expensive gear left behind, locations that show signs of hasty departure, and occasionally, personal items like journals or cameras with disturbing content. One camera, found near Tuolumne Meadows, contained hundreds of photos of the same granite outcropping, taken at precise time intervals. The photographer apparently documenting changes in the rock that aren't visible to casual observation. The photos, when viewed in sequence, show subtle variations in coloration and shadow that don't correspond to lighting changes, as if the rock itself was shifting slightly between frames. These discoveries are handled quietly, documented in internal reports but rarely investigated thoroughly, and the belongings are typically disposed of after the required holding period passes with no claims made. The ranger who described these incidents concluded his interview by saying, "Yosemite has a way of keeping its secrecy. Things happen in the backcountry that don't fit our understanding, and the official response is to document them minimally and move on. We're rangers, not investigators of the unexplained. But after 15 years of finding strange camps, hearing sounds that shouldn't exist, and watching colleagues disappear into bureaucratic silence after reporting anomalies, I started to realize that maybe the park knows something we don't, and maybe it prefers to keep it that way." This brings us to our final mystery, one that ties several threads together and suggests something coordinated might be occurring in Yosemite. In 2016, a hiker named Robert Hammond, an amateur radio operator, was backpacking in the remote northeast section of the park when his radio receiver, which he carried to monitor emergency frequencies, began picking up unusual transmissions. The signals were digital, not voice, but his equipment included a basic decoder that could translate common digital protocols. What he received shocked him. The transmissions appeared to be data packets, brief bursts of information sent at regular intervals, originating from somewhere within the park. Hammond, who had experience with radio telemetry from his work as a wildlife biologist, recognized the pattern as similar to data transmitted by remote sensors, weather stations, seismic monitors, or wildlife tracking devices. But the volume and frequency of transmissions suggested a network of dozens, possibly hundreds of devices, far more than any single research project would typically deploy. Hammond spent 2 days monitoring and recording the transmissions, triangulating their sources as best he could with portable equipment. His calculations suggested the transmitters were spread throughout the park, from the valley floor to the highest peaks, and that they were communicating with a central receiver somewhere in the Yosemite Valley area. But most disturbing was what his limited decoding ability revealed about the data being transmitted. The packets contained geographic coordinates, timestamps, and numerical values that seemed to represent measurements of some kind, but also strings of data he couldn't interpret. Binary sequences that didn't match any standard telemetry format. When Hammond returned home, he analyzed his recordings and attempted to decode more of the transmissions. What he found, or thought he found, was a network tracking something moving through the park, not following trails or roads, but traversing terrain in straight-line paths that paid no attention to topography, as if whatever was being tracked could move through forests, across rivers, and over cliffs without deviation. The timestamps and coordinates, when plotted, showed multiple tracked entities moving through the park simultaneously, some slowly, others at speeds that seemed impossible for anything traveling on foot or by vehicle. Hammond shared his findings with several online communities focused on radio monitoring and unexplained phenomena. His posts attracted immediate attention, including apparently official attention. Within a week, Hammond's website hosting his analysis and recordings went offline. He claimed later it was hacked, and all data was deleted. He received a visit from 2 individuals identifying themselves as National Park Service security personnel, who questioned him about his radio activities in Yosemite and informed him that monitoring certain frequencies was a violation of federal communications law, despite Hammond's insistence that he'd only been passively receiving, not transmitting. Hammond was warned that further interference with park communication systems could result in prosecution. He stopped posting about his findings and, according to his last message before disappearing from online forums, was advised by a lawyer to destroy any remaining recordings and not discuss the matter further. Attempts by other radio enthusiasts to replicate Hammond's findings have had mixed results. Some report detecting similar digital transmissions in Yosemite and other national parks, while others find nothing unusual. The Park Service, when questioned, acknowledges that various research projects use radio telemetry for wildlife tracking and environmental monitoring, but insists all such projects are documented and conducted with proper authorization. They deny operating any covert monitoring systems or tracking anything other than standard research subjects like bears, mountain lions, and rare bird species. Yet Hammond's experience, combined with the fenced research zones, the acoustic phenomena, the half-dome lights, and the pattern of disappearances, suggests something more comprehensive might be occurring. What if these aren't separate mysteries but pieces of a larger picture? What if something in Yosemite is being studied, monitored, or perhaps contained? And what if the most famous and visited national park in America is also host to phenomena the government has decided the public doesn't need to know about? This sounds like conspiracy theory, and perhaps it is, but the evidence exists. Fences in remote areas, unexplained sounds recorded by multiple independent sources, lights that move across granite faces at night, radio networks that don't appear on any official project list, people who vanish without trace, and through it all, a park service that acknowledges nothing, explains nothing, and seems content to let millions of visitors enjoy the scenery while remaining unaware of the mysteries surrounding them. Perhaps that's the real warning, not that Yosemite is dangerous in the obvious ways, wildlife, cliffs, weather, but that it's home to something we don't fully understand, something that's been there far longer than the park itself, something that occasionally reaches out and touches the human world in ways we notice but can't explain. Rangers know, some researchers know, and now you know. When you visit Yosemite, by all means enjoy the waterfalls, climb Half Dome, hike to the high country, but stay on marked trails. Don't camp in remote areas alone. If you hear sounds that don't make sense, don't investigate them. If you see lights moving on granite faces at night, Appreciate them from a distance. And if you encounter fences in the backcountry, respect them, because whatever they're enclosing or protecting isn't meant for casual discovery. Yosemite is beautiful. Yosemite is majestic, but Yosemite is also something else, something older and stranger than the National Park Service acknowledges. And the most dangerous thing about these mysteries isn't what we know. It's what we don't know, and what we might find if we look too closely into places that prefer to remain unseen. If you're planning a trip to Yosemite, subscribe to learn more about what hides behind America's most beautiful landscapes. And share your own experiences if you've encountered anything unexplained in the park. Thousands visit each year. Some of them see things. Most stay quiet. But the more we share, the clearer the pattern becomes. 6 mysteries that shouldn't exist in a park, visited by 4 million people annually. 6 warnings that the wild isn't just wild, it's unknown. And 6 reminders that the most dangerous places are often the ones that look safest on postcards. Stay aware, stay safe, and remember, when something in Yosemite doesn't make sense, there's usually a reason no one's explaining it to you.